Hey everyone, I am Dylan Mitchell, and this is the Rincon Horizons podcast, where we talk about what it means to reach the summit on your leadership journey. We want to help you lead better so your organization can climb higher. Each episode, I'm joined by my co-host and our main contributor, Todd Tuthill, the managing partner of Rincon Aerospace. Today's a milestone for us. This is our second full episode.
Woohoo!
First
Second
time
episode.
we have welcomed a guest on the show. From the very beginning, since we've been planning and talking about this podcast, Todd and I, we have planned to bring other leaders into these conversations, and we're excited to start that today. Todd, before we jump in, give any new listeners a quick overview of your background.
Thank you, Dylan. I'm excited to be here today. I'm Todd Tuthill. I'm an aerospace executive and engineer. Spent most of my career developing flight control systems for aircraft or leading the teams that do that. I've worked for Boeing and Raytheon and Moog Aircraft. I've worked with nearly every other major aerospace OEM in the Western world. But for the past 3 years, I was a vice president for aerospace and defense at Siemens. And now I've moved on to start my new company called Rincon Aerospace. I've held several leadership roles in my career: chief engineer, director of engineering, and vice president. But before we get into today's podcast, Dylan, I have to say something. We have, hopefully, I don't know if we have regular listeners. I don't know if you can have regular listeners by the second podcast. Probably some of the people listening today listen to the first podcast, and they're going to be surprised by our first guest, I think, based on some of the things we said, because there were a couple of things that we kind of went back to over and over again in the last podcast. And it's kind of funny now that I think about it. One was, we said, this is a leadership podcast. It's a leadership podcast. There'll be some aerospace stuff in it, but it's mostly about leadership. And then I was kind of laughing as I was listening back because we made several references to the Top Gun movies.
Yep. We never came back to you. Are you a purist or are you a new age? We never really came back to that.
I think because of the jet, I think I'm definitely a Top Gun Maverick fan. I like them both. Okay. I could probably quote lines for both movies, but I'm a Top Gun Maverick fan. But when people hear our guest today, some of them are going to think we were just dropping Easter eggs like it was a Taylor Swift concert. But that's not what we were doing, because we didn't have our next guest booked yet. So we really didn't know that. So Dylan will do the formal introduction in just a second, but let me say how honored I am that we've got a real-life U.S. Navy Top Gun pilot on the podcast with us today. And we're going to talk about some fighter jet stuff, but don't miss, as you listen, don't miss what we brought the commander on the show today. It's not just because he graduated from Top Gun. It's primarily because he's a naval officer and an incredible leader with things he can teach us all about leadership in all aspects of our lives. So we'll do the fighter jet stuff, but I'm going to contend it's still a leadership podcast.
I think I would agree with that. To your point, today's guest is a meaningful one for me personally. Commander Caleb Brownwater Zeid is a naval aviator with a remarkable record of service and a deep well of leadership experience. And on top of all that, pretty cool, he's my brother-in-law. So this is a fun moment for me as well. Caleb, thanks for joining us. To start, could you give our listeners just a brief, 30,000-foot view of your career so far?
Yeah, sure. And just kind of on the other side, I'm definitely honored to have this opportunity. I'm fairly passionate about leadership. And I don't know if I'm an incredible leader, Todd. I appreciate that. That's kind. I've learned from a lot of mistakes, and I've served with some amazing leaders up to this point. So I've been able to learn from some of the really amazing people and incredible leaders, and I'm fortunate enough to be here to talk to you guys today. Overall, my career, got my undergraduate degree in San Diego, the University of San Diego, in history. And then I went to flight school in Pensacola for all the indoctrination stuff. Did my first year in primary there, went to Meridian, Mississippi to fly the T-45, was selected to go F-18s from there, went to Lemoore to do the FRS at VFA 122. And then I stayed in Lemoore, went to the Vigilantes of VFA 151 as a junior officer. Did almost 4 years at the Vigilantes, 1 1/3 of a deployment there, lots of training. And then I was selected for Top Gun, attended Top Gun in Fallon in January of 2019, stayed up in Fallon on staff at an entity called Strike, which teaches advanced large force integration to deploying air wings. And from there, went to a training officer / department head job back at VFA 151 for my second sea tour. And then spent 34 months there, and then came to Memphis, Tennessee, and I now do West Coast Strike Fighter officer placement and command management to help out the team and get people where they need to go. And then I was recently selected for Operational Command, and I'll be heading back to Lemoore next year to start my training to become Operational Commander back at VFA 151 again. Third time's the charm at the Vigilantes for Brownwater.
Now that everyone has a sense of your background, I want to bring up something that obviously I know, but our listeners, and I don't think Todd, even in our pre-production meetings, I don't think he knows. Would you share your call sign and the story behind it?
My call sign is Brownwater, Caleb Brownwater Zeid. It sounds a lot funnier and more entertaining than it actually is. It's one of the call signs that gets a good reaction, but then there's no like good story your mind would imagine. I won't go into the details of what it makes people think about, but I'm sure the listeners can kind of imagine what that brings to mind in a variety of capacities. But it had to do with when I was patched to the Vigis the first time. It was fairly close to the last workup cycle on the boat. I patched 2 days or 3 days before the squadron went to the boat for a month-long detachment that was at the end of their workup cycle. So the whole squadron is extremely competent. The whole air wing is extremely competent, very well-trained. And then I showed up as a brand new guy. So I'm the opposite of competent. And we go out there and we get qualified. Everybody gets requalified. And the first night, we're doing what's called a blue water certification, which is where the ship and the air wing get qualified to operate out of range of any diverts. So you're, 600, 700, 800 miles off of the coast of any land. Well, that requires a lot of metrics to be met. Anybody that doesn't land on their first try is really bad. I decided my first night on the ship as a brand new guy to miss the wire and bolt her 3 times in a row. But I was scared. I was already mad. I had to do 4 night traps in one night because I couldn't catch the wires. And the next day I was taken off the flight schedule. CAG said no chance can he fly again. We had someone get sick. I had to go flying the next day, even though I wasn't supposed to. I ended up being messed up my pattern. I was way too close. I got waved off twice in a row. So I had 2 more open deck times on the Blue Water Cert. We were essentially 1 pass away from failing and having to restart the whole certification because of me. And then it was that day forward, CAG said, that's Brownwater. I think it was actually my CAG Paddles who was waving, and he said it. And that was it. Second, third day in the squadron, I had a call sign.
You talked a bit about flying at night and missing the first few times. And I think, to mere mortals like Dylan and I, trying to land on a boat in the middle of a dark ocean sounds terrifying. So can you tell us a bit more about night operations on a carrier, the cats and the traps, and how you learned? And I assume you don't miss the wire like that, like you used to anymore, right? That you've gotten better, right?
No, I have indeed showed an improving trend.
That's good.
I've always been I always competed for the award at the end of the line period that we called the average Joe ball flyer, which is the guy that's kind of right in the middle of the pack. But I always competed from below the middle, like trying to get up there as a JO. Then as a department head, definitely improved with my capabilities, and over time as a JO even got better each opportunity I got to practice. So I have a lot of practice doing it, which has then made me better. And now it's certainly not as bad as it used to be. Night bolters still happen every once in a while, and it's still just as terrible because you think you're stopping and then you keep going and you're angry. You're like, that you have another 10 minutes or 8 minutes flying around at night and it's dark and you just want to land and go eat something. But no, it's night operations on the carrier it's hard to explain. They're dark. I think the scariest moment for me is walking out onto the flight deck at night, because you spend an hour or two prepping and briefing and getting ready, and then you spend a few minutes sitting around waiting. And then once it's time to actually walk out, you get dressed and you put on all your flight gear, but you're still in the ship the whole time. The red lights are on. It's kind of dark and it's a little quieter at night, but you're still safe inside the skin. But as soon as you open that hatchway and go out into the outdoors area, it's just pitch black. There's a little bit of lights on the flight deck, but in general, it's just dark. And then you kind of adjust and you walk out and you walk up the catwalks, walk up some stairways and get onto the flight deck, and people are moving and there's things happening and you're trying not to get in the way. But it's always that walking out onto the flight deck, it never feels great. But as you get more comfortable, once you get in the airplane, you're like, okay, I think I can do this now. And then you get in the airplane, you get all settled in, you start up, you do all your preparation, and then you go up to the cat shot. A lot of experienced guys will tell you, when you're young, the night landing is the scariest part of night operations because you don't know what's happening on a cat shot. You're just happy to be there. You come back around and making the approach and getting to the appropriate window and landing is hard and scary. But then as you know, and in bad weather, that's certainly true. Like a night bad weather landing is not good, not fun. There's very little enjoyable until you stop. That's the enjoyable moment. But the cat shot can oftentimes be even worse, especially if there's any kind of cloud layer. You just basically get launched off the front into black because the ocean is black and the stars and the moon are blocked. It's black. Everything is black. You don't know. You just have to look at your instruments and hope that it's being true. And a lot of vertigo and weird things happen on the cat shot. So people more experienced people end up disliking cat shots a little bit more than the night landings, I guess.
Thank you to you and to all the other brave pilots in the Navy that are willing to risk their life to do that for us. Thank you.
I tell everybody, it's my pleasure. I get to do something that I've dreamed about, and it's something that I've been fortunate enough to do for almost 15 years. So it's been great.
Talking about squadron leadership roles, you've held several leadership roles at the squadron level. Could you walk us through some of those responsibilities and share what each one taught you? Because I think a lot of people have this preconceived notion that you're a pilot, you fly jet, you go home. And there's a little bit more to it than that.
Indeed. The Navy jokes and that naval aviators are officers first and then pilots. That's a general naval aviation mindset. But you start your leadership essentially as soon as you arrive at a squadron. So the only time you're not leading anyone other than yourself is when you're in the training commands. But as soon as you get to a squadron, you're given some kind of job and you have to lead, whether it's side-to-side leadership, i.e. peer leadership, or it's stepping into a division officer role. So a junior officer will typically run one of the divisions in a squadron, and they'll be in charge of somewhere between 30 and 50 sailors and a variety of maintenance departments or maintenance personnel. And that's kind of where you do as a JO, as your main leadership learning crucible. And you learn a lot from your chiefs and things like that. And your department heads kind of mentor you as the heads of your department. Then you go into operations. If you're in operations as a JO, you don't do it. It's a lot of peer leadership, kind of working with each other. And as you get more senior, you kind of lead the rest of the junior officers. As a department head, you're running each department. So it could be an admin department of 10 sailors that manage all the admin duties of the squadron, or it could be a maintenance department, which is kind of the premier leadership moment of the department head role, where you can have 215 to 240 sailors and all the maintenance departments. And so you're responsible for the upkeep, the programs of the jets, and all of the different inspections and things like that, managing 34 or 40 programs, depending on what the current NAMP is. But you kind of have to be an expert in all, or at least know everything so you can help direct the maintenance department.
So, Commander, I wonder, when you were thinking about going in the Navy, you wanted to fly jets. Were you just thinking about flying jets? Did you understand the leadership responsibilities and how much that would be there when you got to the Navy?
No, I did not. It was not something that you don't see in Top Gun. Whether Maverick or the original, you don't see the pilot finish the mission, shoot down a couple MiGs, land, and then have to go sit down at his desk and do 2 hours of paperwork to make sure that the programs are in line and do fit reps, which is what he's really doing after he does all that stuff. Ultimately, it ends up being rewarding in a different way, and you can take just as much fulfillment from some of those opportunities to lead. And the people you serve with, really you realize how much of a difference the leaders you serve and you work for can make in your own career. And I was fortunate to be able to follow in the footsteps of many great leaders that inspired me to stay in the service and pursue the different things I did.
Before we move on, I heard you say you can learn to love it. There's things that you can learn to love, even if it's the things that people don't necessarily think are the sexy part of being a pilot. While you're learning that, would you give any practical advice just from a leadership perspective? How did you learn to love the things that weren't necessarily the thing that you thought you were signing up to do?
I found mindset becomes extremely important because anybody can choose that, like, I don't want to do this. This is just a waste of my time. All I want to do is be studying tactics and preparing for my flight. If you can start your day with, okay, I'm going to spend an hour in the shop doing these things. All you have to do is go talk to any sailor in a maintenance department for 10 minutes and you'll realize exactly why it's worth it and why that's almost as more rewarding, because you get to talk to these young men and women who have chosen to leave their home somewhere in America or overseas. The amount of sailors that enlisted in the Navy to come work for a squadron or come do something just to get their citizenship is phenomenal. And so you get the opportunity to work with these young men and women who are just excited, motivated, and they kind of like restores your faith in humanity a little bit when you get to talk to the sailors. Even when they're having a hard time, you still get that opportunity. So really the people that you get to lead is what creates that. You realize that, wow, I get to do something to help these people out if I have the smallest influence as their leader.
That's super practical knowledge that I think a lot of people can apply. I do know that you're a Top Gun graduate. Mm-hmm. Which is something very few people will ever experience. And I know the original movie was a huge part of your childhood. How old were you when you first saw it? What kind of impact did it have, as you started thinking about aviation in general and maybe the Navy?
Yeah. It had a lot of influence in driving me to my chosen career path or my dreamed career path. I don't know when I first saw it, probably way too young for my parenting style and what I would let my kids watch. I guess my kids have watched Top Gun, so I can't say that. But, I still fast forward through the weird shadow scene still to this day. No, I don't know. I watched it a lot growing up to the point where I think I broke a VHS tape at one point. And it's really the only thing I can remember having wanted to do, which is somewhat common amongst other people in the Navy. Not that Top Gun was that big of an influence, but just the desire to pursue aviation or being a pilot is common amongst us. I don't know what the percentages is, but quite a few people have always wanted to do it.
Brownwater, when you think about your time at Top Gun and the things you learned, would you tell us about not just necessarily the fighter jet stuff, but the leadership stuff? Talk about how it made you a better leader and a better naval officer.
Top Gun is unique in that the influence of Top Gun is designed to percolate all the way down to the most junior person in a squadron, so the most junior pilot in a squadron, and even down into the training pipeline to a certain extent, because you learn in your training, and certainly once you get to Top Gun, very quickly that I'm not as good as I thought I was, and there are people that are much better than me, for example, the Top Gun instructors, and yet you learn that it's a constant and relentless search for learning points, searching to find the mistakes that you made in every flight, in every brief, and every simulator. You learn to really isolate and find those mistakes, turn them into a way to learn so that you prevent yourself from making those mistakes again. That translates really well into leadership because leaders are making decisions by nature on a daily, hourly basis, whether it's in a meeting, whether it's in a one-on-one with a direct report, or it's any decision. You should always be debriefing your decision to see how you did and if you could have done it better. And once you debrief it, if you figured out ways you could have done it better, then it's now your responsibility to teach it to the next person that's going to do the job or to someone who may be in a similar decision-making situation. And that's the overarching end goal of Top Gun, is to create tactical fighter pilots who are at the edge of tactical capabilities, but can also recognize and teach to mistakes that are made during the execution of those tactics. That's the goal. And that's why Top Gun graduates are called Strike Fighter Tactics Instructors, because that's your primary mission, is now to go teach and maintain that standard of instruction.
Interesting. I think that's something that, again, I don't think I got out of the whole Top Gun thing. I guess there's more to Top Gun than we saw in the movies, huh?
Indeed, there is. There is.
We're getting into the heart of this conversation, but we're about out of time. We're going to pause here and pick things up in the next episode. Thank you so much, Caleb, for joining us today. And thank you, Todd. Thank you to everyone listening. Every episode, we unpack the moments and decisions that shape us as leaders at work, at home, and everywhere in between. Our goal is simple. We want to help you lead better so your organization can climb higher. If today's conversation resonated with you, please consider sharing it with a friend or a colleague who is on their own leadership journey, because we all are on one. You can learn more about Rincon Aerospace or connect with Todd using the links in the show notes or at rincon.aero. That's Rincon, RINCON.aero. My name's Dylan Mitchell. You can find more about my work over at DM.supply. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Rincon Horizons podcast.